All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everybody who joined in. Today's topic, as you guys know, is from HIPAA to HITRUST. It's the path for health data maturity. Sean is our Vice President of Compliance Services and our in-house HITRUST guru. And rather than have me talk and introduce him, I'm going to let him do that himself.
Yeah, I like being introduced. Makes me feel good. All right, so welcome everybody to From HIPAA to HITRUST webinar presented by Aquarion. Again, I'm Sean Dowling. I'm the VP of Compliance Services for Aquarion. In today's presentation, we'll take a look at what HIPAA and HITRUST are and how they impact your organization. We'll also address how Aquarion is positioned to help your organization navigate becoming HIPAA compliant and HITRUST CSF certified. And for some reason, the presentation doesn't want to change my screens. There we go. Healthcare is complex and can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Whether you're an industry professional or not, it's commonly felt that more time is spent understanding the healthcare puzzle versus solving it. That's where Accorian comes in. We've set out to investigate the underlying logic behind the astounding regulatory maze that healthcare compliance has become, and have created a comprehensive roadmap to help navigate the confusion associated with being compliant across several frameworks, to include HIPAA. Let's see. We're going to start out today by talking a little bit about, what is HITRUST and what is HIPAA. For HITRUST, specifically, we'll define, from the Health Information Trust Alliance, known as HITRUST. It's an organization comprised of healthcare industry leaders who regard information security as a fundamental component to data security and exchanges. The HITRUST organization, in partner with other technology and information security leaders, created and maintains the HITRUST Common Security Framework. HITRUST is not a new set of standards, but comprised from several industry-leading standards and is continuously updated and improved upon. The HITRUST CSF is a system that helps organizations comply with HIPAA and other regulations such as PCI, NIST, and ISO through a detailed yet flexible and efficient approach for regulatory and compliance management. The HITRUST CSF is the most widely used security framework in the U.S. healthcare industry today. For HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, it's the United States legislation act that was signed into law in August of 1996. Back in 2013, HIPAA was expanded with the HIPAA Omnibus Rule to implement additional guidelines in accordance with the guidelines set forth in the HITECH Act. HIPAA outlines requirements for healthcare organizations and their business associates related to ensuring the security of sensitive patient data. HIPAA's primary focus is to mandate industry-wide standards for healthcare information and electronic billing and other processes. It reduces healthcare fraud and abuse and requires the protection and confidential handling of protected health information, or PHI. HIPAA, in and of itself, is an act of law that sets out to protect patient medical records. In practice, HIPAA provides the patients with a certain level of privacy when it comes to why, when, and who can access their personal data stored by healthcare organizations. The truth of the matter, however, is that whether a company is HIPAA compliant or not is subjective without an actual certification process. In other words, a healthcare provider or its business associate can say they're HIPAA compliant without adhering to part or any or all of the laws laid out by HIPAA. HITRUST and HIPAA are both hot topics in the healthcare arena, but what's the difference between the two? HITRUST builds on HIPAA. It takes HIPAA, a non-standard and non-prescriptive compliance framework, and creates a standard compliance framework, assessment, and certification process for the healthcare industry. HITRUST also harmonizes HIPAA with other compliance frameworks such as PCI and NIST. HITRUST also adapts requirements for certification to the risk of an organization based on organizational, system, and regulatory factors. As opposed to HIPAA, which has defined penalties for security breaches, the enforcement of HITRUST is dependent on the healthcare industry itself. Typically, covered entities like hospitals and payers require HITRUST CSF certification of their vendors. Having been through both HIPAA audits and certified CSF assessments, it's safe to say that HIPAA CSF certification is a much more rigorous process with a higher burden of proof put on the organization trying to achieve certification than a standard HIPAA audit. Achieving HITRUST certification requires significantly more time, effort, and resources than a HIPAA audit. Being HITRUST CSF certified should be seen as a more significant badge of security and compliance than completing a standard HIPAA audit. A lot of times you'll hear HIPAA versus or HITRUST versus HIPAA, HIPAA versus HITRUST. In either case, this shouldn't be considered a versus type scenario, because HIPAA is a set of standards, and the HITRUST CSF provides a prescriptive set of controls that meet the requirements of not only HIPAA, but other security standards such as PCI and NIST. As such, HITRUST is a valuable resource for risk management and compliance for organizations that handle sensitive data. Rather than a HITRUST versus HIPAA scenario, the two go hand in hand. It's not possible for healthcare organizations to become HIPAA certified, as there is no official certification process or accreditation. An external audit is the best way to ensure HIPAA compliance. When partnering with third-party organizations, covered entities have business associates sign a business associate agreement that is essentially a promise that they've implemented the right security controls to protect sensitive data. As a certifiable framework with controls mapped to every HIPAA standard and specification, HITRUST CSF certification provides a more reliable and consistent way of covered entities to ensure that their business associates are in fact compliant. Several major healthcare providers already require their business associates and their third parties to comply with the HITRUST CSF. Certification adds a dose of confidence and a layer of trust. So why does HITRUST matter? Well, as healthcare is becoming further dependent on evolving technologies to store and transmit data, cybersecurity and compliance have become a progressively emphasized yet convoluted matter. Navigating the tortuous labyrinth of federal, state, and third-party security mandates has become a feat that can quickly consume an organization's resources. If that isn't enough, getting through all the twists, turns, and pitfalls to achieve compliance is only half the battle. Healthcare organizations and IT vendors must also prove their compliance to guarantee they are a trusted business partner. With all considerations, isn't it obvious that the industry needs a system that is clear, standard, and secure? And that's basically where HITRUST comes in. It was established in order to put the trust back into data security for the healthcare industry. Achieving a HITRUST certification, however, isn't easy, and it shouldn't be. Obtaining a HITRUST certification is an important way to communicate that information security and privacy is both a necessity and a priority for your organization. It is a commitment that is recognized by business partners, third-party companies, and regulatory agencies. Here are some of the benefits of achieving a HITRUST certification. Reduced chances of security breaches and instances. This helps your organization adhere to reduce the chance of an incident, thus saving costs due directly to the breaches and any secondary costs that may be impacted by your organization. Provides systematic identification. It helps in identification of most important assets within your organization, critical workflows, risk, vulnerabilities, and threats. It assists in forging security in employees. Let's face it, employees are the weakest link in security, and this program helps forge the importance of security with your employees and contractors. It provides a structured program, providing an instruction manual, if you will, for successfully navigating security. It validates health security across the organization, ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability is in place for EPHI. It also improves your brand reputation by increasing trust with clients and partners, fulfillment of compliance norms, and providing a competitive edge in your marketplace. Now that we have a better understanding of HITRUST and HIPAA, let's discuss how Aquarion can help you develop a clear roadmap to becoming HIPAA compliant by implementing the HITRUST CSF certification. We have developed a streamlined methodology to assist organizations with cyber risk programs that are in sync with HITRUST CSF certification requirements. Our pre-certification services help you fully understand and gain clarity into the HITRUST CSF lifestyle so you can reduce the time, cost, and resources and prepare your organization for success. To provide a bit of background on Aquarion, we were founded so organizations can stop compromising between technology necessities and technology budgets. Formed by technology and cybersecurity leaders, Accorion strives to be a full-service technology partner. Our hands-on approach combined with goal-oriented proven methodology brings both fiscal value and expertise to each of our clients. Accorion is a global team of experts that helps companies navigate today's complex technology landscape. We specialize in providing security consulting, compliance, development, and staffing services to organizations of all sizes. We're headquartered in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and have offices in Dubai, Pune, and Bangalore, India, which are there to support our customer base globally. The HITRUST approach that we have developed here at Aquarion is broken into 3 distinct phases. We have discovery, we have our roadmap execution, which is a suite of optional services, which we'll cover in a few minutes, that will help your organization remediate any gaps that are identified. And then we have our validated assessment, which is actually going through and completing the HITRUST CSF requirements and submitting your assessment to HITRUST. We'll take a look at each one of these in a little bit of detail. In the discovery phase, this is where we determine what is in scope for your validated assessment. Here we will review your environment, risk, and any contractual obligations you may have with your clients. We'll build a test object in the HITRUST MyCSF tool to determine the number and type of controls that will be assigned to your organization. We'll review those controls with key stakeholders in your company to identify any gaps. Review your policies and procedures to ensure they meet the HITRUST control requirements. Build a project plan for remediation of the identified gaps. And we'll create a timeline for the readiness, steady state, validation, and submission to HITRUST. In most situations, this phase takes approximately 2 to 3 weeks to complete. In the roadmap execution phase, as I mentioned, this is comprised of optional services to assist you in remediation of the identified gaps. Aquarion offers project management and consulting services to assist in expediting the remediation process. These services include policy and procedure review and development, where we'll review your current P&P and we will work with your team to develop and or update to meet the HITRUST control requirements. HITRUST specifically calls out that policies and procedures must be reviewed and approved by senior leadership, communicated to your stakeholders within your organization. And for your procedures, they clearly state that you must show within your processes who, what, when, and how procedures are to be executed within the organization. This all must be documented and supplied to HITRUST for evidence to show compliance with the individual controls. So we will work with you on building those documents and making sure that you guys do meet the compliance requirements. We can provide you guys with supplemental staffing to support the remediation effort. And then for the technical implementations, you know, we know because of our experience working with different organizations of different sizes, we know where the pitfalls lie within the technical side of HITRUST review. So we want to make sure that we are working with you guys on identifying what are the appropriate tools to be put in place, what processes and remediation efforts need to take place there. But some of the areas that we see commonly throughout different organizations that need to be updated or implemented would be things like your MFA or your single sign-on, endpoint management, protection, patch management, access control, firewall maintenance and management, your SIM or your MDR rollout. And then we also provide vulnerability testing, where we'll do your penetration testing, your risk assessment work, and we are working on additional services to add here for the vulnerability testing that we'll roll out later this year. So again, we offer a complete customizable solution based on the needs of your organization and your budget. The third phase of the validated assessment, HITRUST validated assessment project is the actual validated assessment services. Here we use a combination of both our onshore and offshore resources to ensure quality while reducing client costs. The validated assessment process begins with a full review of your scope, assigned controls, and provided evidence. We'll work with you to make sure everything is prepped and ready to go before we start the review and scoring process. An assessment team that includes an engagement executive, a team lead, and certified assessors is assigned to your assessment and will begin the validation by reviewing your population files and selecting samples and additional evidence. The team will also begin validating your policies and procedures against the assigned HITRUST controls, just as we've mentioned on the previous slide. Once the PMP review is complete and all evidence requests have been satisfied, the project team will focus on validation of the implementation evidence. This process will take between 6 to 8 weeks and really depends on the complexity of your organization and the assessment and the number of controls that are assigned to you. Obviously, the more complex an organization is, the more controls that will be assigned. And then we'll also have to include regulatory factors if you are subject to state, federal, or third-party regulatory factors. We'll review those in your scope, and that would add additional controls to your assessment. During the validated assessment period, the project team will work with the client on uploading evidence and entering the maturity scores into the HITRUST MyCSF tool. We are partnered with you. We're not there to make any organization look bad, and we're definitely not there to fail anybody. Our goal really is to make sure that your organization is secure, that you are meeting the standards. So again, we're going to work with you to make sure that you're meeting the requirements. It's not just going through and checking the boxes in the audit and determining whether you pass or fail. Let's see. Once we get the assessment completed, we have a internal QA team that will review your validated assessment, and will ensure that the evidence and samples meet HITRUST standards. The QA team will coordinate with the project team for any changes required prior to submission. The goal here is to get the assessment reviewed, completed, reviewed, and then submitted to HITRUST, which then goes through another QA process on their side. So upon successful completion of the QA process on the Aquarion side, the assessment will be presented to the engagement executive for submission to HITRUST. Couple things with timelines here, and there are a few changes that have rolled out here recently with HITRUST that will impact timelines starting immediately for different organizations. As I mentioned, the discovery phase here will take 2 to 3 weeks, and again, depending on complexity and the level of the review that that you have engaged us to work with you on, that will fluctuate slightly there. The roadmap execution phase, again, this is your remediation effort. So again, it depends on what gaps have been identified within the assessment and what effort you guys are going to be requiring to go through and complete these. It could be anything from just rolling out policies and process, updating documentation, to full-scale tool implementation. So again, this here could take anywhere between 2 to 8 months, depending on where you guys are on your technical implementation side. HITRUST has, again, one of the changes that have come out here is their steady state. HITRUST requires a 90-day steady state for all your systems, infrastructure, any supporting implementation processes. Up until July, this was across the board for policies and procedures as well. They've recently come out and stated that policy and procedures only need a 60-day bake-in period. So we do have to split that apart a little bit there. So for policies and procedures, it's a 60-day implementation or incubation period. And then for your system, infrastructure, or all supporting implementation processes must be in place for a minimum of 90 days before we start the validated assessment. So that is something that would impact organizations, especially ones that are looking for getting submitted or getting a HITRUST certification immediately. One of the other changes that recently came out with HITRUST that is impacting schedule, they have rolled out as of July 1st a reservation system. And this is for the QA process that I mentioned earlier on their side. A reservation must be made within their MyCSF tool to as a placeholder for them to schedule your QA review with their organization. The available dates for HITRUST QA reviews are managed by HITRUST. We have nothing to do with that. We will help you go through and schedule that. We want to do that as early in the process as we possibly can because the available slots are very limited. And in some cases, it may take several months before HITRUST is able to get to a QA review, just to a standard QA review. HITRUST, however, does offer an expedited QA review service for an additional fee, but that is an arrangement that you and your sales rep from HITRUST would have to work through. We can help coordinate that with you, but we have no control over when the QA reviews take place. And then once we get through the review process, everything goes into HITRUST. HITRUST usually takes between 60 to 80 days to complete their QA review to issue a draft report. And it's just a preliminary report that says that here's the results of the review. You've passed these domains. Everything looks great. You could receive caps or corrective action plans out of this draft review, where we would have to go back in and help you guys put together remediation plans for some things that you didn't score high enough on. Again, nothing real major with that process there, just making sure that we put in some high-level milestones and get that information entered into the MyCSF tool. Once you have reviewed, approved your draft report, and completed your caps, it takes approximately 30 days for HITRUST QA to complete their process, and they will issue a final report. The big note here on the final report is the date of the final report is backdated to the date that the assessment was submitted to HITRUST. So even if it takes HITRUST 2-3+ months to complete their QA review and get through issuing the draft report and things of that nature, the date of your certification will be the date that we, Aquarion, submit you guys to HITRUST. So we'll be backdated in that process. Along with all the services that we provide, Accorion, we have a value proposition, for all our clients, and this goes across the board for all the services that we provide. We successfully assist multiple clients to meet requirements of HITRUST, HIPAA, ISO 27001, SOC 2s, GDPR, etc. Pretty much any framework that's out there. We're going to leverage our on and offshore team to ensure that we have the right experts and that we're meeting, any cost constraints and keeping costs as low as possible for your organization. We are going to work to prioritize overall security requirements. So we do work with these frameworks to set a baseline, but we will be working with your security professionals to make sure that your organization is not just meeting minimum standards, but meeting industry standards, and your organization is secure. One of the things we want to ensure here is that, even though we're just trying to get a certification, we're not leaving any gaping holes in your infrastructure or anything that may cause concern for you guys down the road or your clients. We will provide program management for multiple activities. So again, just because we're doing a validated assessment for you, we will help you guys through your remediation efforts. We'll help you with your testing efforts. We'll work with you guys on pretty much anything from a security stance that needs to be done. So we can consult with you on what needs to be done, and we'll work with you on managing the implementation process for those individual areas. And then the ability to help successfully implement multiple standards through a common framework. And again, this kind of goes back to what we started with here. HIPAA is not a certifiable framework. It's a set of standards. HITRUST is the best tool out there to provide HIPAA compliance through a certification process. So again, this is where we want to come in here. We want to make sure that you guys are following what the standards are. You have the appropriate checkpoints in place. You're performing the appropriate activities throughout your day-to-day operational space to maintain compliance with HIPAA. And again, this applies, not only to HIPAA, but across the board to many different frameworks. And then at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you guys are secure. We're bringing the best possible solutions to the plate for your organization with cost and timeline in mind. So with that, we're going to open the floor for some questions, and we'll see how things went today. We're awful quiet out there. No questions today?
No, sorry, Sean. I was speaking on mute this whole time.
Okay.
So there was a question around where to really begin. So one of the questions that came in, so they are HIPAA compliant because they have to. I don't think they are fully HIPAA compliant. They are quote unquote HIPAA compliant. So what are the first steps you could take to start going on that HITRUST route? You mentioned that it's a pretty long and daunting process. So how do we slowly break off pieces to kind of get to that end goal?
Yeah, so what we want to do is kind of going back to that discovery phase. We want, and again, just because it's discovery and the intent may be moving to a certification body at some point, the discovery phase will allow us to review controls from HITRUST, from NIST, from HIPAA. We can use different frameworks there depending on what the objective is, and do the same thing. So we can talk with you, walk through the control requirements, and see where you guys are, do that initial gap assessment, and determine where you guys are to say, okay, here's the best starting point for you. You're firm here, but we need to implement a few things to get you guys going down this path. So we can work with you guys on that. And again, that discovery phase does go across multiple frameworks. It just how it happens today. We're talking about HITRUST, but that's where we would recommend have a conversation with us about what the goals are, and then we can go in and customize a specific plan for you.
The second question had to do with how big the team that is going to be. Sorry. Another question came in. How big is the team, or what is the client's efforts really? So we claim to do a lot of implementation work. We will project manage some things, but what is required internally for a successful HITRUST run?
That's actually a great question. It's because this is something we see all the time with small organizations. You will have to have dedicated personnel from your IT side of the house, preferably people that have security backgrounds. That may be a team of 2 or 3. It could be more, obviously, if you can get the appropriate resources there. It would be a struggle, and this is something that we do want to communicate out to our clients. Small shops, 1-2-man shops, are going to struggle trying to implement a HITRUST certification process. And it's really just because of the sheer volume of activities that need to take place, not only in the preparation work, but the ongoing activities to maintain compliance. On average, small organizations will receive between 250 and 300 controls. Out of those, there's about 75 reoccurring events, and we have a calendaring system that will share with you and notify you of what needs to take place. But this is everything from day-to-day log reviews and activities need to take place to annual risk assessments and things of that nature. So there's a lot of work that requires dedicated people on your staff to take care of. So it would be, we'll see what we can do to work with you if you are a smaller organization, and how you can, utilize some of our services or supplement some of your staff to be able to do this. But yeah, it's something that for 1-2-man shop IT departments, it's going to be a heavy lift. And then as you grow there, or as your organization gets a little bit bigger, things will level out a little bit. But initially, yes, it is a fairly decent undertaking for small shops.
And so before I'll answer the question over 90 days in a moment, but can we talk a little bit about the common compliance framework, and does it cover SOC entirely? How do you loop in SOC and NIST and ISO into this HITRUST requirement? Are a lot of the controls the same? Is it easier to go from SOC to HITRUST or ISO to HITRUST than anything else?
Yeah, so a lot of the controls are very similar or the same. You will see the majority of the NIST controls have been assimilated into the HITRUST CSF, as well as SOC 2 Type 2 level controls. So there is a lot of similarity with that. There's a lot of overlap between the two. In many cases, if you've already completed a SOC 2 Type 2, we can utilize portions of that to answer some of the controls. Within a HITRUST, there's some specific processes and verbiage we have to go by to cite a SOC 2 Type 2. But it is helpful if you already have one in place. If you don't have one, there is a combined service that HITRUST offers that is a HITRUST CSF certification with SOC 2, so that we would work those in tandem. It's two separate organizations because a SOC 2 Type 2 has to be completed by an accounting firm. But we do work with organizations that we can do that there, and we do share that information back and forth. So we limit the repetitive work, and we reuse as much of the evidence as we possibly can. So there is a lot of similar approaches with this here. And remember, HITRUST is pretty much comprised of the majority of the other frameworks. So again, there are minor changes or minor differences in a lot of the controls. But overall, it's still pretty much asking the same thing.
Thanks. And the second question was, how good at we are meeting our targets? How many projects have run more than 90 days? I'm a little confused by that 90 days thing, but yeah. Yeah,
let's clarify that first, because and we go back to the timelines here. There's and that is something. HITRUST from beginning to end is not a 90-day project. HITRUST, the validated assessment portion of it that that the assessor will perform, we have up to 90 days to complete that audit. The prep work to get there, as I mentioned, could be and probably will be several months, depending on the maturity of the organization. So, if we're coming in, you're brand new, you're missing a bunch of, you don't have, different types of tools in place. We got to put mobile device management, we got to put multi-factor in, we've got to build out, some auditing and reviews. It's going to take a while to get there. So that remediation phase to prep could be, months. It could, I have organizations that's taking us 6 months plus to get through these things. So yeah, don't get that confused with the 90-day window. The 90-day window is once you are ready for the assessment, everything's been remediated, you feel fairly confident based off of your internal reviews and readiness assessments, conversations with us that yeah, we think you're pretty much there, we can get you across the finish line. That 90-day timeline starts then.
Sorry, Sean, I don't mean to cut you off. There was a clarifying point to that. It was more than 90 days past the targeted completion date. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that generally depends on the undertaking from the organization itself. So there is a implementation phase that is necessary in HITRUST once you realize what gaps that you have and what need to be fixed, what policies and procedures need to be implemented themselves. Depending on how long that takes an organization will dictate how close we are to hitting the expected target date. But in a situation like that, I would say that's entirely in the organization's hands. And Sean, correct me if I am wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of caveats to that as well. But yes, it is in the hands. Now, the 90-day window, when we officially start that validated assessment, our project plan, drives us closer to a 60-day delivery. We have up to 90 days to complete that. But again, the complexity of it will dictate that. But also, if we feel that we're running past the 90 days, that usually means the organization is not ready for the assessment. There's something causing us not to be able to complete the reviews. So that's probably lack of evidence or trying to spend too much time, band-aiding things that probably need a little bit more attention. So, we're going to try to identify those as early on in the process and come back and say, look, we really think you need to put more effort into this. Here's the recommendations we have, and let's work through that there. But no, we very rarely, if at all, ever miss the 90-day period. but we will go back if we feel that the organization isn't ready for the assessment. We will come back and stop the assessment at that point, have that discussion with you, and talk about what the remediation needs to be to restart it.
Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to send them in. I mean, we would love to be as helpful a resource as possible for you guys.
I think most of those questions came from Dino. Yeah, and by all means, please, check with us. Let's set up a conversation, because I'm pretty sure I'm probably muddying the waters more than I'm making it clear for you.
All right then.
How do you budget for a project like this? Good question. The budgeting process here is, it can be difficult because there's numerous costs involved in this. And that's why in that discovery phase, we want to be able to bring that to light. So, during that process, we'll come back and say, for a small fee, we'll help you guys discover, what's missing here, what needs to be done. And we'll lay that roadmap out for you. And we will provide you guys with relatively, solid numbers to say, in order to complete your policy and procedures, it's going to take, this amount of money, this amount of time. Implementation of different tool sets, or building new processes. This is based off our experience. How much is it going to cost you guys to do this based off of your organizational size and needs? And then also, again, try to put together a timeline, for you guys to work with from that. So budgeting a project like this is very difficult, but it can be done. It's it's done every day. And the big thing, I think, really is to understand, this is a large dollar undertaking. To go back and essentially build out your information security management program to the minimum standards of HITRUST does take a lot of effort. It takes a lot of hands to get there. So there is a decent internal budget cost on this that needs to be dedicated to the project. So we can work with you guys individually on what those numbers look like.
Do you have a CUI of HITRUST version 10?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on version 10. It's been delayed again till next year. We've heard a lot of rumors about what it's going to include. And for those who aren't familiar, there is a new version of the HITRUST MyCSF, which has been slated several times over the past year and a half to be delivered, and it's been delayed numerous times. But the new version 10, the one thing that we are confident in that we know is coming is they're changing the structure from the 19 domains to individual categories, which will allow us to be more prescriptive to different organizations, and it won't require organizations to pass full domains in order to pass HITRUST certification. So my assumption is it's going to look more like one of the smaller, like NIST or a HITECH process where we're looking at assigned controls based off of the organization's scope, not necessarily off the domains. So that's one of the big changes we've seen there, and we do anticipate a lot of updating or modernization of the controls. For those who have been looking at HITRUST or know a little bit about it, you'll know that a lot of the controls, or many of the controls, are older and don't necessarily comply with the way the world does business today. Especially, obviously in the last year and a half here, we've completely changed the way we all work. So HITRUST needs to make those changes too. Many organizations have gotten away from office space. They've gotten away from local area networks, wireless networks, if they exist, are probably guest networks now. So we handle employee and remote access a lot differently than we did a year and a half ago. So I'm assuming HITRUST version 10, MyCSF version 10 is to take into account a lot of that, and I do feel that the delays that we've been seeing here are because they're trying to modernize with the way the world is working today. All right. Any other questions there? I think we covered them all.
I think so as well. So I just want to, Sean, you want to say, or I'll say it, I'll go first. Thank you guys for joining. I hope you guys found this helpful. I will send you a follow-up with the recording to this webinar, as well as our contact information in case you guys have any lingering questions or want to continue a conversation with either Sean or I. So thank you guys very much.
Yep. Thank you guys very much. Do appreciate you taking time to listen to me today. Thank you.
I'll get in touch with you. Yeah, I'll call you in a second.
Yeah, call me back.
Yeah,
Right.
bye.
Bye.